Grant Mercer slid the envelope across the conference table with 2 fingers, the way you'd slide a tip to a valet you didn't respect. Wear something that doesn't embarrass the organization, he said, not looking up from his phone, and try not to talk to anyone important. Elena Marlowe picked up the envelope. Inside, a formal invitation to the Vane Syndicate's annual gala. Mandatory attendance, it said. Black tie. She looked at Grant. He was already texting someone, laughing at something on his screen, completely unbothered by her presence in the room. 3 years. 3 years she'd sat 42 floors above Manhattan and made herself as unremarkable as the carpet. 3 years of gray cardigans and downcast eyes. And, yes, sir. And of course, sir. And this man had just handed her an invitation to her own public humiliation, like it was nothing. Like she was nothing. Elena set the envelope down on the edge of the table and smoothed it flat with her palm. Thank you, she said. Grant waved her out without looking up. She walked back to her desk, sat down, and did not move for 63 seconds. Then she opened her bottom drawer, took out the black notebook she had kept since her first week on the 42nd floor, and turned to a fresh page. She wrote Grant Mercer's name at the top. She had a lot written beneath a lot of names in that notebook. She was going to need every word of it. If you've ever been underestimated so completely that the person doing it didn't even bother to hide it, if you've ever smiled and said, "Well, something harden in your chest," then you already know. Exactly what Elena felt walking back to that desk. Subscribe to this channel and follow this story to the end, because what happens next will stay with you. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city or country you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The 42nd floor of Vane Financial Group smelled like recycled air and ambition. Carpet was charcoal gray. The walls were matte white. Every surface was designed to communicate precision, control, and the complete absence of warmth, which Elena had always thought was a perfectly accurate representation of the organization that occupied it. Vane Financial Group was not a financial group. It was a machine for moving money that should not exist through channels that appeared to exist legitimately, wrapped in the language of corporate investment and dressed in the clothes of a mid-sized Manhattan firm. It had 43 employees on the books, 12 of whom were legitimate. The rest were there for the same reason Elena was there, because Silas Vane needed people who understood numbers and knew how to be quiet about what those numbers meant. Elena had understood this on her second day. She had filed it away and continued doing her job. She was exceptionally good at her job. The thing people misunderstood about Elena Marlowe, and almost everyone misunderstood her, which was precisely the point, was that she not made herself invisible out of weakness. She had done it out of calculation. She had $214,000 in medical debt, tied to her mother's ongoing care for a spinal condition that had put Margaret Marlowe in a facility in Queens 18 months ago. She had no savings. She had no family left who could help. She had a skill set that was, in the legitimate economy, worth $60,000 a year at best, and in this economy worth 3 times. That plus benefits she never discussed with anyone. She needed this job, so she wore the gray cardigans. She kept her eyes down. She answered questions directly and did not volunteer information. She learned everything there was to learn about the organization, not because she intended to use it, but because she could not stop herself from understanding the systems she was embedded in. It was the way her mind worked, always had been. She saw structures the way some people see faces, instinctively and completely, understanding the architecture before she understood the individual parts. By the end of her first month, she understood exactly how Arthur Bellamy was skimming the offshore accounts. She had said nothing. By the end of her 3rd month, she understood Grant Mercer's side operation with the catering company and the 4 ghost employees on the syndicate's payroll. She had said nothing. By the end of her first year, she had mapped the entire financial structure of the Vane Syndicate, from the legitimate front companies down to the deepest offshore layer. And she kept that map in her head because writing it down would have been dangerous. She had said nothing. She had survived. And then Grant Mercer had slid that envelope across the table. Elena spent 45 minutes that evening in the storage room standing in front of a mirror. She'd leaned against a filing cabinet, looking at herself. She looked like exactly what she was supposed to look like. Forgettable, sensible. The kind of woman who took public transit and brought her lunch and did not cause problems for anyone. She thought about her mother, Margaret, who used to laugh at everything, who had taught Elena to add before she taught her to read, who now needed someone to help her with her shoes in the morning because the nerve damage in her hands had gotten bad enough that she couldn't manage the laces alone. She thought about the gala invitation still sitting in her bag. She thought about Grant Mercer's face when he had not even bothered to look at her. Then she thought about the black notebook in her desk drawer and the 3 years of numbers inside it, and what those numbers meant to the people whose names were written above them. She straightened her shoulders. She had been doing this long enough. The dress cost $640 from a consignment shop in the West Village, and it fit like it had been made specifically for the woman Elena intended to be on Saturday night, rather than the woman she had been pretending to be for 3 years. Black, floor length, cut in a way that was not provocative, but was absolutely deliberately, unmistakably there. She paid a woman in her building $20 to cut and shape her hair into a razor-sharp bob that landed exactly at her jawline. She spent 17 minutes on her makeup. She was not practiced at it, and it showed slightly in the line above her left eye, which she corrected 3 times before accepting that it was as good as it was going to get. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror at 6:43 on Saturday evening and did not recognize herself, not because she looked unrecognizable, but because she looked, for the first time in 3 years, like herself. She picked up her clutch, small black, containing her phone, her ID, a lipstick she had purchased for this specific occasion, and a 4-page printed document she had prepared over the previous 4 days, and she walked out of her apartment. The gala was held in the private ballroom of the Meridian Hotel on Park Avenue, a venue that Silas Vane's organization had used for 8 consecutive years, because the hotel's events manager had a financial arrangement with the syndicate that benefited everyone involved and was never discussed openly. Elena arrived 17 minutes after the stated start time, which was long enough for the room to be full and short enough that she was not late. She handed her invitation to the attendant at the entrance, stepped through the doors, and stopped. The ballroom held approximately 200 people. It was lit by chandeliers that cast a warm gold light over tables draped in white linen. At the far end of the room, a 4-piece ensemble was playing something smooth and forgettable. Men in expensive suits stood in clusters, drinks in hand, their body language, the careful choreography of people who were measuring each other constantly and never letting it show. Elena had never been in a room like this. She had read about rooms like this. She had processed the financial records that funded rooms like this. But she had never stood in one in a black dress with a razor bob, and the deliberate, unhurried posture of someone who had decided she was done being furniture. She felt the room shift before she had taken 3 steps inside, not dramatically, not all at once. It was a ripple, a head turning, then another, a conversation trailing off mid-sentence, someone's gaze catching on her and staying there a beat too long. She walked toward the bar because she needed something to do with her hands, and she kept her eyes moving because she was cataloging the room the same way she always cataloged everything, noting who was standing with whom, what that meant, who had positioned themselves near the exit, who was watching the door. She ordered a sparkling water. The bartender looked at her with a particular kind of professional neutrality that told her she looked like someone worth being neutral around. Elena. The voice came from her left. She turned. Silas Vane was standing 4 feet away. She had worked 42 floors below this man for 3 years. She had processed his financial directives. She had corrected his accountant's errors. She had, on 2 separate occasions, quietly identified discrepancies in transfer requests that, had they gone through, would have exposed the organization to significant regulatory risk. She had flagged them through proper internal channels without drawing attention to herself, and both times the corrections had been made without anyone acknowledging that she was the one who had caught the problem. She knew what Silas Vane looked like from photographs in the organization's internal documents. 34 years old, black hair, a face that was sharp without being handsome, the kind of face that made people uncertain whether he was looking at them or through them. He was wearing a charcoal suit that fit perfectly, and he was holding a glass of whiskey had barely touched. He was staring at her like she was a math problem he could not immediately solve. "Mr. Vane," she said. "You look different," he said. It was not a compliment. It was not an insult. It was an observation from someone who was recalibrating. "I often look different outside the office," she said. He looked at her for another 2 seconds. "Grant invited you." "Grant told me attendance was mandatory." Something moved across Silas's face. Fast, controlled, gone. "Right," he said. Then he walked away, and Elena watched him go, and she noted the direction he moved in, and she noted who he stopped to speak to, and she turned back to the bar and took a slow sip of sparkling water. She had 60 seconds before Grant found her. Probably less. 41. Grant Mercer materialized at her elbow with a drink in each hand and a smile that had not reached his eyes at any point in the 3 years she had known him. He was 41, broad-shouldered, and possessed of the specific kind of confidence that comes not from accomplishment, but from never having been seriously challenged. He looked at her the way someone looks at a piece of furniture that has been moved into the wrong room. "Well," he said. "Grant," she said. "You clean up?" He said it like it was a joke, looking around to see if anyone nearby had heard, angling for an audience. "Thank you for the invitation," Elena said. It was thoughtful. Smile flickered. This was not the reaction he had expected. He had expected some version of gratitude mixed with discomfort. The performance of a woman who knew she was somewhere she did not belong and was trying hard not to show it. What he was getting instead was Elena being precisely as calm and contained as she always was, except dressed differently, which somehow made the calmness worse. "Come on," he said. "Let me introduce you to some people." She let him guide her through the room. She cataloged everything as they moved. Names she recognized from documents. Faces she matched to financial records. Across the ballroom, she spotted Arthur Bellamy standing near the window with a glass of champagne, talking to a man she identified as one of the syndicate's legitimate banking contacts. Bellamy was 63, white-haired, and had been skimming the offshore interest accounts for what Elena calculated to be at least 4 years. Grant steered her toward a cluster of men near the center of the room. He was doing it wrong. She could see from his body language that he was positioning her not as someone to be introduced but as something to be displayed. And the display was meant to be unflattering. He wanted these men to see the mousy secretary in the ball gown. He wanted the comparison to be funny. The problem was that the comparison was not going the direction he had planned. She watched the men in the cluster register her. She watched the calibration happen in real time. Grant started to say something. Elena spoke first. "You're Marcus Webb," she said to the man on the left. "You handle the transit contracts for the Northeastern Distribution Network. Your monthly processing volume went up 31% in Q3, which is either a very good sign or a flag worth examining, depending on whether the increase was reported correctly." She smiled. "I'm Elena Marlowe. I work in financial operations." Marcus Webb said nothing for approximately 3 seconds. Then he said, "Is that right?" "It is," Elena said. Grant's jaw had tightened. She could see it from the corner of her eye. The thing about knowing where the bodies were buried, financially speaking, was that it gave you a kind of freedom that had nothing to do with recklessness. Elena was not reckless. She had never been reckless. What she was, standing in that ballroom, was simply done with the performance of smallness. She moved through the room with Grant failing to keep up, and every conversation she entered the same way, with a precision that told people she knew exactly who they were and what they were doing, and had known for some time. She did not threaten anyone. She did not expose anything. Not yet. She simply made it clear, in the language of implication and specificity, that she was not there to be someone's punchline. By the time Grant realized what was happening, she had spoken to 11 people, and the room had shifted around her. The shift was subtle. In this kind of room, everything was subtle. But she could see it, the way conversations ended when she approached, and then resumed differently afterward. The way people straightened slightly when she looked at them. The way Arthur Bellamy, across the ballroom, had gone very still. Grant took her arm, not gently. "What are you doing?" he said, low and controlled. "Networking," she said. "Isn't that what galas are for?" "Elena." His fingers tightened. "I'm being serious." "So am I," she said, and she looked at his hand on her arm until he let go. She saw Silas Vane across the room, watching. He was leaning against the bar with his whiskey, and he had been watching her for what she estimated was the last 12 minutes, and his expression was the one she had catalogued from his photographs. The look of someone doing math they hadn't expected to need to do. Filed this away. Then she found Arthur Bellamy. Bellamy saw her coming and did what men like Bellamy always did. When they were frightened, he smiled wider and spoke faster, trying to build a wall of pleasantries between himself and whatever was approaching. Miss Marlowe, isn't it? I've seen you around the office, of course. Wonderful event this year, don't you think? The Meridian always does. $412,000, Elena said quietly. Over 38 months. The interest differentials on the Cayman accounts routed through the currency conversion layer before settlement. It's elegant, actually. I almost missed it the first time. She paused. I didn't miss it. Bellamy stopped talking. The man he had been speaking to had the social intelligence to drift away. Bellamy's face had gone through several colors and settled on something between white and gray. I don't know what you think you. I'm not thinking anything, Elena said. I'm telling you what I know, which is different. I'm also telling you that this information is currently sitting in a document on my personal computer, and the only reason it hasn't gone anywhere is because I haven't decided what to do with it yet. She looked at him steadily. I thought you should know that. Are you threatening me? His voice was low and careful. The voice of a man deciding whether to be frightened or furious. I'm informing you, she said. There's a difference. She walked away from him. Behind her, she heard him set his champagne glass down on a passing waiter's tray with a small, controlled click. She found a quiet corner near the window and stood there for 3 minutes, letting herself breathe. Her heart was moving faster than she wanted it to. Her hands were steady, but her chest felt like something in it had been pulled taut and was still vibrating. She had not planned to confront Bellamy tonight. She had planned only to survive the evening without being humiliated, which had been the original calculus. But once she had started moving through this room as herself, instead of as the woman she had been pretending to be, something had become clear to her that she had not fully understood before. The armor she had been wearing for 3 years was not protecting her anymore. Just wait. She had been afraid of what would happen if she was seen. Standing in this room tonight, she was beginning to understand that she had been more afraid of staying invisible. Silas Vane appeared at her elbow. He did not announce himself. He simply materialized there, the way powerful men in small rooms do, as though the space rearranged itself to accommodate him. What did you say to Arthur Bellamy? He said. The truth, she said. He looks like someone shot him. I didn't shoot him. I just told him what I knew. Silas looked at her. He had a way of looking at people that was not hostile, but was extremely direct, the kind of eye contact that made most people uncomfortable because it communicated that he was actually paying attention. What do you know? Quite a lot, Elena said. I've been working on your 42nd floor for 3 years. A long pause. The ensemble was playing something slow now. Someone laughed loudly near the entrance. Bellamy has been stealing from us, Silas said. It was not a question. 412,000. Give or take, Elena said. Can give you the exact figure if you want it. And Grant? She looked at him. What about Grant? You were with him for 40 minutes. You know things about people in this room. Do you know things about Grant? Elena was quiet for 4 seconds. I know about the catering company, she said. The ghost employees. The invoices that don't match the services rendered. It's smaller than Bellamy's operation, but it's messier, which makes it more dangerous to the organization from a legal exposure standpoint. Silas Vane looked at her for a long time. How long have you known? He said. About Grant, 14 months. About Bellamy? 2.5 years. And you said nothing. I needed the job, she said simply. He absorbed this. She watched him absorb it, watched him recalibrate in real time, reassessing 3 years of her against this new information, recalculating what she was and what she had been doing and what it meant that she had known, and waited and said nothing. You were protecting yourself, he said. Yes. Smart. I thought so, she said. Something changed in his expression. It was not warmth. It was closer to recognition, the look of someone who had just identified something they had been looking for without knowing they were looking for it. Come find me before you leave, he said. We need to talk. Then he walked back into the room, and Elena stood at the window, and through the glass Manhattan was lit up. in all directions like a circuit board at night. All that organized electricity running through invisible channels to keep the whole machine alive. She thought about her mother's hands. She thought about the black notebook in her desk drawer. Thought about the 4-page document in her clutch, which she had not yet needed to use, and which was beginning to feel like a weapon she had brought to a fight that was turning into something else entirely. Straightened her shoulders. She was not done yet. The evening had barely started, and already nothing about it was going the way anyone had planned. Not Grant, not Bellamy, not the 200 people in this room who had dismissed her for 3 years, and not Elena herself, if she was being honest. She had come here to survive. She was starting to think she might do something more than that. Across the room, Grant Mercer stood with a fresh drink and watched her, and the thing in his chest that he would have called instinct, and everyone else would have recognized as fear, was telling him, loudly and clearly, that he had made a serious miscalculation. He had invited Elena Marlowe to this gala to humiliate her. He had not considered, not for 1 second, that she might be the kind of woman who could not be humiliated because she had decided, sometime before she walked through those doors, that she had nothing left to lose by being exactly who she was. He watched Silas walk away from her, and he watched her stand at the window, and he watched the room continue to reorganize itself around her presence. And the drink in his hand felt very cold. He did not know yet what she had told Silas. He did not know the specifics, but he had been in this organization long enough to understand the language of the room, the way attention moved, the way power redistributed itself when someone new entered the calculation. Elena Marlowe had entered the calculation, and Grant Mercer, for the first time in a long time, could not immediately see how to get her out of it. Silas found her again at 11:17, when most of the room had loosened with alcohol and the ensemble had switched to something with more bass. He did not ask her to follow him. He simply moved toward the corridor off the main ballroom and trusted correctly that she would come. The room he led her to was small and functional, a private dining space the hotel kept for overflow, currently empty, lit by a single overhead light that was not flattering to anyone. There was a round table with 4 chairs. Silas sat in one. He did not gesture to the others. Elena sat anyway, across from him, and set her clutch on the table between them. He looked at the clutch. "What's in there?" "Documentation," she said. "Of what?" "Several things." He looked at her face instead of the clutch. "Bellamy is going to spend the rest of this evening deciding whether you're a problem he can manage or one he needs to escalate. You understand that?" "Yes." "Men like Bellamy have managed problems before," Silas said. "Kind that don't get reported." "I know. And you're not frightened?" Elena considered the question seriously, the way she considered everything. "I'm frightened," she said. "I'm just not letting it make decisions for me." Silas was quiet for a moment. Outside in the corridor, heels clicked past on marble, and someone laughed too loudly. And then it was quiet again. "Tell me about Grant," he said. "You already know about Grant. Tell me anyway." She opened her clutch and removed the 4-page document and set it on the table. Catering company is called Meridian Provisions. It's not related to this hotel. The name is coincidental. Grant incorporated it 18 months ago through a Delaware shell. He has 4 employees on the syndicate payroll who perform no actual services. The invoices are structured to stay below the internal review threshold. Over 18 months, it's approximately $93,000. She paused. The dollar amount is not the problem. The exposure is the problem. The invoicing pattern is sloppy. A motivated auditor would find it in 40 minutes. Silas picked up the document and read. He read slowly and completely, which told her he was the kind of person who did not skim things he needed to understand. When he finished, he set it back on the table and looked at her. "Put this together tonight?" "I put this together over 14 months, she said. "Printed it 4 days ago." "Why 4 days ago?" She met his eyes. "Because Grant gave me the invitation 4 days ago." Something shifted in Silas's expression, a tightening around the jaw, a stillness in his eyes that was not calm so much as controlled. He understood what she was telling him. She had not prepared the document in response to a threat. She had prepared it in response to an insult, which was a different thing entirely, and told him something about her that a threat response would not have. "You were going to use this tonight," he said. if I needed to, and Bellamy's information. Yes, both of them. In one evening, he set the document down. That's either very brave or very reckless. It's neither, she said. It's arithmetic. I've been carrying this information for years. The longer I carry it, the more danger I'm in if it comes out that I knew. Tonight was the night Grant decided to make me visible, so I controlled the visibility. Silas looked at her for a long time. The overhead light was doing nothing for either of them, and he didn't seem to care, which she noted as something that differentiated him from most of the men she had worked around. I want you in a different role, he said. She had expected this. She had not expected it this quickly. What role? Financial operations. Real oversight. Not processing, not clerical architecture. You understand how the system works. I want you to make it work better. Better meaning more efficient, or better meaning harder to find. Both, he said. And I want you to find every Bellamy and every Grant inside the organization. Every person pulling from the wrong account. Every gap. Elena looked at the document on the table. That's a significant mandate. Yes, people will push back. Yes, possibly more than push back. I know, Silas said, which is why the role comes with my backing. Explicitly. She looked at him. I want that in writing. He almost smiled. Not quite. You'll have it, and I want access to the complete account architecture. Not the summary layer, the actual structure. Every offshore entity, every correspondent account, every conversion channel. You already have most of it. I want the rest. He nodded once. Done. Lena picked up the document and folded it back into her clutch. Then I'll need a few days to clear my existing workload. Clear it tonight, Silas said. I want you moved to the new position by Monday. She stood. He stood. They looked at each other across the small table in the unflattering light, and what passed between them was not warmth and not attraction, and not quite trust. It was something more functional than any of those things. Recognition. Two people identifying something useful in each other and deciding in real time to act on it. She walked to the door. He spoke before she opened it. Bellamy, he said. I'll handle it. I know you will, Elena said. She opened the door and walked back into the corridor. Grant was waiting for her. He was leaning against the wall, 12 feet from the door, with his jacket unbuttoned and his tie loosened. And when she walked out, he straightened and the looseness left his face entirely. You were in there a long time, he said. We had a lot to discuss, she said. About what? Work, she said, and started walking. He fell into step beside her, too close, the way people do when they want to crowd you without touching you. Elena, stop. She stopped. She turned to face him. His face was working hard at something: composure, calculation, anger, and none of it was sitting right. What did you tell him? Grant said. What I knew, she said, which is what I always do. About me. She did not answer that. She just looked at him, and the not answering was its own answer, and he knew it. His jaw tightened. Something moved in his eyes that she catalogued carefully, not the petulance she was used to seeing from him, but something harder and older. This was the Grant underneath the one who slid envelopes across tables without looking up. You have no idea what you've just done, he said. I have a fairly good idea, she said. Silas is not your protector. Silas protects Silas. Most people protect themselves, she said. That's not unusual. You think because he gave you a title. He didn't give me a title tonight, she said. Tonight is just a conversation. Titles come Monday. The information landed on Grant's face like something physical. He had not known it yet, and now he did. And she watched him file it and recalculate in real time. And she watched the calculation come out somewhere that did not look good for either of them. You've been waiting, he said slowly. This whole time. 3 years. You've been sitting there at that desk and waiting. I've been doing my job, she said, and building a file on everyone in the organization. I understand the systems I work in, she said. That's not a secret. Why you hired me. His voice dropped. I didn't hire you. Prove to hire. Semantics, she said. He stepped closer. She did not step back. Think carefully about what direction you're walking in here. There are people in this organization who have been here since before Silas took over. People who remember how things used to be handled. I know who they are, she said. I know their account structures too. He stared at her. For a long moment, he simply stared, and she could see him searching for a move and not finding one, and the not finding was making something in him close down and go cold. "All right," he said finally. Quietly, he straightened his jacket. He took a step back. He was resetting into the version of himself that wore his authority like a suit, the practice-polished surface that did not show the working underneath. "All right," he said again. "We'll see how Monday goes." He turned and walked back toward the ballroom. Elena watched him go and felt the small hairs on her arms stand up, not because of anything he had said, but because of the way he had said "all right." Twice quietly, with his jaw level and his eyes as gone flat. She had heard that tone before, not from Grant, from the financial records of people who had used it. It was the tone of someone who had decided to stop talking and start planning. Monday arrived the way Mondays always did on the 42nd floor, without ceremony, with recycled air, and with the particular quality of light that came through tinted windows and flattened everything into the same institutional gray. Elena arrived at 7:42, 48 minutes before her previous start time, wearing a charcoal blazer over a white shirt that she had purchased Sunday afternoon. Not the gray cardigan. The gray cardigans were at the back of her closet now, and she intended to leave them there. Her new office was on the east side of the floor, 3 doors down from Silas's, with the door that closed completely and windows that looked out over the East River. It was not a large office. It was a real one, which was different. On her desk, she found an envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper on vein organization letterhead confirming her position as Director of Financial Operations, effective immediately, with signature authority across all primary accounts and direct access to the complete structural architecture of the financial network. It was exactly what he had promised. She sat down at the desk, read the letter twice, and then put it in the top drawer and opened her laptop. She had work to do. The first resistance came at 9:15. Daniel Cho was 38, sharp-faced, and had been the syndicate's head of account management for 6 years. He appeared in her doorway with a tablet under his arm and an expression that was professionally neutral in the way that things are neutral when they're working very hard at it. "Ms. Marlowe," he said, "I wanted to introduce myself. I manage the day-to-day account operations." "I know," she said. "Sit down." He sat. He set the tablet on the desk, and then thought better of it and picked it back up. "I wanted to discuss the transition," he said. "In terms of workflow, I think it makes sense to maintain the current. Pull up the Q2 reconciliation for the Cayman layer," Elena said. A pause. "Those accounts are typically reviewed on a quarterly basis. We're mid-cycle, so Daniel." She looked at him. "Pull up the Q2 reconciliation." He pulled it up. He turned the tablet toward her. She looked at it for approximately 90 seconds. Then she said, "The settlement lag on the third-tier conversions is 48 hours longer than it should be. That's not a system delay. That's a manual hold somewhere in the chain. Who authorized the hold?" Daniel's neutral expression did almost nothing. Almost. "I'd have to check the authorization logs," he said. "Do that," she said. "Have an answer for me by noon." He stood, of course. "And Daniel." She looked up from the screen. "I have full access to the authorization logs myself. I'm asking you because I want to know if you'll tell me the truth, not because I need you to tell me." He stood in the doorway and looked at her, and what she saw in his face was the same thing she had seen in Grant's face. Saturday night, the recalculation, the reassessment of someone who had formed an opinion based on incomplete information and was now receiving the additional data. "Understood," he said, and left. By noon, she had identified 3 additional irregularities in the account structure. Not theft, at least, not obviously. More like pressure points. Places where the system had been built with just enough flexibility that someone who understood it could pull a few thousand here, defer a settlement there, and over 18 months, accumulate something significant without triggering any of the existing review thresholds. She was building the map of it in a spreadsheet that she kept on her local machine, not the network, when Silas appeared in her doorway. "How is it?" he said. "Worse than you thought," she said. "Better than it could be." He came in and sat down across from her, the same way he had sat across from her Saturday night, without asking, without ceremony. "How much worse?" "The 3 parties you already knew about Bellamy, Grant's catering operation, and a third one you probably didn't know about involving the transit account reconciliations. Those are the obvious ones. Below that, there are at least 6 more pressure points that aren't theft yet, but are being held open by someone who intends for them to become theft. It's infrastructure, she said. Someone built in the capacity and is waiting for the right moment. Silas was very still. How long would it have taken your predecessor to find this? My predecessor wasn't looking, she said. How long would it take someone looking? A motivated forensic accountant with full access? 4 to 6 weeks. She looked at him. It's been 4 years since anyone did a complete audit. I know. So whoever built these pressure points has been patient, she said. Very patient. This isn't opportunism. This is a long play. Quiet in the room changed texture. She could see Silas working through it, not panicking, which she noted, but thinking carefully and fast, which was a different thing. You think it's one person, he said. I think it's one mind, she said. The architecture is consistent. The style is consistent. Whether it's one person or several people, following one person's blueprint, I can't say yet. How long to find out? A week. Maybe 10 days. I don't want to move faster than I can verify. He nodded. He stood. He was at the door when she spoke. Silas. It was the first time she had used his name without the title, and she did it deliberately, to see how he received it. He stopped but did not tense. I need to know if there's anyone in this organization I should assume is loyal to you before I make contact with them. People who will tell you things straight rather than tell you what they think you want. He thought about it. 2 people, he said. Marcus Webb and a woman named Carla Dunn, who runs the legal interface layer. Webb you met Saturday. Carla keeps it to herself. I'll let them know you have my backing. Thank you, she said. He left without responding. Daniel Cho returned at 12:08 with the authorization logs open on his tablet. He sat down and placed the tablet on her desk, and this time he did not pick it back up. The holds were authorized by Arthur Bellamy, he said, backdated to appear as system flags. But the manual override code is his. How long have you known, she said. The question sat between them. He looked at the tablet. He looked at the window. He looked at her. 8 months, he said. And you said nothing. Bellamy has been here since before I was hired, he said. He has relationships I don't have. A pause. Had, he corrected. Bellamy was removed from his accounts this morning, Elena said. Silas had called her at 8:40 to confirm it. He's currently being processed by the organization's internal compliance team, which means he has approximately 48 hours before his situation becomes formally final. Daniel absorbed this. His face did something complicated. Should have said something, he said. Yes, she agreed. But you're saying it now, which is the relevant fact. I need you, Daniel. You know the operational layer of these accounts better than anyone. I need that knowledge, and I need it. Honest. He looked at her directly for the first time since he had sat down. You're not going to make this easy, are you? No, she said. But I'm going to make it fair. That's different. He nodded slowly. Okay, he said. What do you need? By Wednesday, the 42nd floor had divided itself into factions, so quietly that if you weren't paying attention, you might have missed it. Elena was paying attention. It was what she did. On one side, the people who had recalibrated and decided that the new reality was the new reality, and adjusting to it was a matter of survival. Daniel Cho was there now, 2 of the junior account managers, the woman who handled the legal interface layer, Carla Dunn, who had come to Elena's office Tuesday morning without being asked, sat down across from her and said, I hear you're the one who finally looked at the books properly. I want you to know I'm not surprised by what you found, which was as close to an alliance offer as Elena had received in 3 years of working on this floor. On the other side, the people who had not yet decided, who were watching, waiting, measuring, and then there was Grant. Grant had not come to her office. He had not acknowledged the new title in any email, any meeting, any corridor encounter. He had simply continued operating as though she did not exist in her new capacity, which was not ignorant, she knew that, but strategy. She was thinking about this on Wednesday afternoon, when Marcus Webb appeared in her doorway. You found something, he said, looking at her face. I find things constantly, she said. You're going to need to be specific. He came in and closed the door. Webb was 51, broad, with the particular stillness of a man who had spent a long time in rooms where sudden movements had consequences. He sat down and leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. There's talk, he said, below the floor. The people Bellamy was connected to not just inside this organization. Outside contacts, the ones he was feeding information to, through the offshore interest transfers. Elena felt something cold move through her chest. He was passing information outward. Not just money, Webb said. Structural information, count architecture, entity maps. She sat very still. To who? We don't know yet. But whoever it is, they know a lot about how this organization is built. And now they know Bellamy is gone. He looked at her. They're going to want to know why. And they're going to want to know who found him. Cold thing in her chest spread outward. She had known, walking into the gala Saturday, that making herself visible carried risk. She had calculated that risk against the alternative and decided visibility was necessary. She had not calculated for Bellamy being a conduit to outside parties. She had understood him as a thief, which was manageable. An information broker was something else. How solid is this intelligence? She said. Solid enough that I'm sitting in your office on a Wednesday afternoon, Webb said. She nodded slowly. How much time do we have before they make contact? Days maybe. A week if we're lucky. Then I need the complete offshore entity map by tomorrow morning, she said. Everything. If there's a layer I don't have access to yet, I need it tonight. I'll talk to Silas, Webb said. I'll talk to Silas, she said. You find out everything you can about Bellamy's outside contacts. Names, account numbers, any correspondence you can pull. Stood. He was at the door. He paused with his hand on the frame and looked back at her. For what it's worth, he said, I watched you at the gala. The way you moved through that room. He paused. Bellamy was scared of you before you even said his name. Whatever that means to you. It means I read people well, she said. It means more than that, Webb said and left. She found Grant's fingerprints in the architecture on Thursday morning at 6:23, before anyone else was on the floor. She had not been looking for them. She had been mapping the pressure points she had identified Monday, the built-in capacity for future theft. The long play she had described to Silas, tracing the authorization codes backward through layers of delegated access and redelegated access, and sub-authorization chains that were designed to obscure exactly what she was now uncovering. And there, buried 4 layers deep in an account structure that nominally belonged to a transit subsidiary in New Jersey, was an authorization signature she recognized. Not Grant's name. He was too careful for that. But the code structure, the specific way the delegation chain had been constructed, the particular choice of which entities to route through, the timing of the access requests, matched something she had seen in the Meridian Provisions documentation. Catering company, the ghost employees, same mind, same patience, same architecture. Grant had not just been running a small side operation. Grant had been building something inside the organization's financial structure for years, and the Meridian Provisions, invoices, were not the main event. They were a distraction, the kind of messy, easily found irregularity that a motivated investigator would find and feel satisfied about finding, while missing what was actually underneath it. She sat back in her chair in the empty 47 floor at 6:24 in the morning and looked at her screen and felt the full weight of what she was looking at. Grant had not brought her to the gala to humiliate her. He had brought her to the gala because he had needed her to expose Bellamy. She went very still. Bellamy had been skimming the offshore interest accounts. But Bellamy had also been passing structural information to outside parties. If Bellamy's outside contact was aware of the long play Grant had built into the architecture, if they had obtained that information from Bellamy, then Bellamy was not just a thief. Bellamy was a liability to Grant's real operation. Grant had needed someone to remove Bellamy, someone whose sudden rise and aggressive investigation could be explained by ambition and opportunity rather than orchestration. He had handed her the invitation and waited for her to do exactly what she had done. She had walked into that gala and set off the exact sequence of events that Grant had needed her to set off, and she had done it believing she was acting for herself. Her hands were flat on the desk. She could feel her own pulse in her fingertips. She had not been the weapon. She had been the mechanism. And now Grant had exactly what he needed. Bellamy was gone. The outside contact was neutralized. Elena had Silas's complete trust and full access to the organization's financial architecture, and she was standing in the middle of a structure that Grant had spent years building, with no idea, until this moment, that she was standing inside it at all. Elena did not move for 4 minutes and 30 seconds. She knew the count because she was watching the clock in the corner of her screen and using it as an anchor, something fixed and reliable to hold onto while everything else, she thought. She understood about the last 7 days reorganized itself into a shape she had not seen coming. 4 minutes and 30 seconds, and then she stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the East River in the early morning light. It was gray out there, cold-looking. The water moved the way it always moved, which was without any concern for what was happening 42 floors above it. Pressed her forehead against the glass for exactly 3 seconds. Then she stood straight, turned around, and went back to her desk. She needed to think, not react. Think. The sequence was this. Grant had identified Bellamy as a liability before Elena had ever been handed that envelope. Bellamy had been skimming for years, which Grant knew, and Bellamy had been passing structural information to outside contacts, which Grant also knew, and those outside contacts represented a threat to the long architecture Grant had built. Inside the organization's financial foundation, the real operation, 4 layers deep, that the Meridian Provisions invoices were designed to camouflage. So Grant needed Bellamy gone. But Grant could not move against Bellamy directly without raising questions about why he knew what he knew. He needed a mechanism, Nitsum. He needed someone with enough institutional knowledge to find Bellamy, enough anger to act on what they found, and enough credibility with Silas to make the removal stick. He had found all 3 qualities in Elena, who had been sitting 42 floors below him for 3 years, knowing everything, saying nothing, waiting. He had handed her the invitation. She had done the rest herself, part that sat worst in her chest, worse than the manipulation, worse than the architecture, worse than the realization that she had been used, was that she had felt so certain. She had stood in that ballroom in the black dress with the razor bob, and she had felt for the first time in years like herself, like someone acting from her own will, and she had been, in some sense, acting from her own will. But her own will had been inserted, carefully and precisely, into a channel that Grant had built for it. She had walked through the door he had opened and believed she was the one doing the opening. She needed to know how much of it was designed. The gala, yes. Her confrontation with Bellamy, yes. But what about Silas? Had Grant anticipated that Silas would promote her? Had he planned for that outcome, or had it exceeded what he needed? If Grant had anticipated the promotion, then he had given Elena access to the complete financial architecture, not because she had earned it, but because that access was what he needed her to have, which meant the question was not what Grant had built into the organization. Question was what he needed her to find. She called Marcus Webb at 6:51. He picked up on the second ring, which told her he had not been sleeping. Webb, I need you in my office, she said now. Don't tell anyone. A pause. On my way. He arrived 12 minutes later, still in his coat, and she closed the door and did not offer him a seat, and he did not take one. Grant, she said, tell me everything you know about his position inside this organization that isn't in the official structure. Webb looked at her face, and whatever he saw there made him skip past any preamble. He's been here 11 years. He came in under Silas's father, Walter Vane. When Walter died and Silas took over, there was a period about 8 months where the succession wasn't clean. Grant was the stabilizing force. He kept the external relationships functional, the payments moving, the outside parties satisfied while Silas consolidated. So Grant has relationships that predate Silas, Elena said. Significant ones. Some of the older network, the distribution partnerships, with the financial intermediaries in the southeastern corridor, those relationships belong to Grant personally, not to the organization. To him. If Grant left the organization, those relationships would follow him. That's always been the assumption, Webb said carefully. Which means Silas has kept Grant in place not because he trusts him, but because removing him would cost more than containing him. Webb said nothing, which was its own answer. Elena sat down and looked at the screen. I found something this morning, 4 layers into the account architecture, on the transit subsidiary accounts. Grant's signature obfuscated but his. He's built something into the structure. It's not theft yet. It's capacity. Webb sat down now without being offered. Capacity for what? I don't know yet. That's the problem. She turned the screen toward him. I found the transit accounts. But the architecture is consistent, same building style, same delegation structure, which means there are other instances, other places in the account network where he's done the same thing. Webb studied the screen. How many? I've been working since 4:30 this morning. I've found 3 so far. I think there are more. The question is what they're all pointing toward. She looked at him. What would you build if you were planning to leave an organization and take a significant portion of its liquid assets with you on the way out? The silence in the room was the kind that has weight. An exit structure, Webb said quietly. Tell me exactly what that means. You'd need liquidity access across multiple account layers simultaneously. You'd need to be able to trigger transfers from several points in the network at once, so that by the time anyone identified one transfer, the others had already cleared. He paused. You'd need someone inside with administrative access to all the accounts. Someone the system would recognize as authorized. Elena felt the cold thing in her chest again. He needed me to have access, she said. It was not a question. He needed someone to have access, Webb said carefully. Someone Silas trusted enough to grant it fully. And if that person's access credentials were copied or mirrored, then whatever that person authorized, the system would record as their authorization, not his. She sat back. She looked at the ceiling for 2 seconds and then looked at Webb. How quickly can someone mirror access credentials in this system? Depends on the level of access to the architecture itself. He stopped. Elena, do you have a reason to think your credentials have been compromised? I have a reason to think I was promoted specifically so that they could be, she said. Webb stood up. I need to make a call. Not yet, she said. If you call anyone before I understand the full scope of this, we alert Grant before I know what he's actually built. I need 2 more hours. 2 hours is a long time if he's already moving. He's not moving yet, she said. He's been patient for 4 years. He's not going to get impatient because Bellamy is gone. Bellamy being gone is part of the plan. Everything is on schedule from his perspective. She looked at Webb steadily. He doesn't know I found the transit accounts. He doesn't know I know. That's the only advantage I have, and I need to use it correctly. Webb sat back down. 2 hours, he said. They found 5 additional pressure points in the account architecture over the next 90 minutes. Each one followed the same pattern. Each one was positioned at a node where a single authorization could trigger a transfer across multiple entities simultaneously. Together, the 8 points Webb and Elena had mapped formed a structure that, if activated simultaneously, would drain approximately $41 million from the organization's liquid account in a transfer sequence that would take less than 4 minutes to complete and would route through 6 different offshore jurisdictions before the money settled anywhere traceable. Elena stared at the map she had built on her screen and felt something in her settle that was not calm and was not resignation. It was the particular clarity that comes when a problem becomes so large and so immediate that there is no longer any point in being afraid of it. He was always going to leave, she said. It looks that way, Webb said. Question is when, and whether he needed to wait for something specific. She thought about this, the outside contact. The one Bellamy was feeding information to. If that contact knows about the architecture, then the exit structure only works if that contact is neutralized, Webb said. Bellamy is gone, which means the information pipeline is severed. Grant's contact doesn't know what Grant has built. Grant is now ready to move. She turned and looked at Webb. Timeline. I don't know. Guess. Days, Webb said. He's been patient 4 years. He won't wait once the pathway is clear. Elena closed the spreadsheet and opened a new document. Her hands were moving before she had fully decided what she was doing. I need to brief Silas. He's not going to take this well. No, she said. He's going to be furious. At Grant, and probably at me, because I was the mechanism. And the fact that I didn't know I was the mechanism isn't going to feel like a meaningful distinction when he's angry. Can you manage that? I've been managing things I didn't cause for 3 years, she said. I know how to handle being blamed for them. She picked up her phone. Webb put his hand on her arm. Not hard. Just enough. Before you call him, Webb said, you need to understand something. If Grant's timeline is days, and if he has a mirror of your access credentials, then he may already be inside the system, right now building the final trigger sequence. If you alert Silas, and Silas acts before you've locked down the access points, Grant's system flags the interference and executes automatically. Elena looked at him. He built a dead man's switch, she said. That would be the most patient way to do it.
Webb said.
She set the phone down. She sat very still. The dead man's switch changed everything. It meant she could not simply expose the architecture and let Silas respond to it, because Silas's response removing Grant's access, freezing his assets, any of the direct organizational actions, that would be natural first moves, might be the trigger condition itself. Any interference with the structure Grant had built might be exactly what the structure was waiting for. She needed to dismantle it from the inside, carefully and completely, before anyone else touched it. But to dismantle it, she needed to understand every node. And to understand every node, she needed access to the final layer of the architecture, the trigger layer, which she had not found yet. She pulled the screen back toward her and started looking. She found the trigger layer at 849, and the finding of it broke something open that she had not been prepared for. The trigger layer was not inside the Vane organization's account structure at all. It was inside the organization's legal interface layer, Carla Dunn's domain. Elena sat in her office at 8:49 in the morning and looked at Carla Dunn's name attached to the authorization structure of Grant Mercer's exit plan. And she thought about Carla Dunn appearing in her office Tuesday morning, unsolicited, saying, I hear you're the one who finally looked at the books properly, and I want you to know I'm not surprised by what you found. Carla Dunn, who Silas had named as one of two people Elena could trust. Carla Dunn, whose access to the legal interface layer meant she could authorize the final transfer sequence position that would appear to any external auditor to be routine legal compliance activity. Carla Dunn, who had walked into Elena's office and offered her an alliance before Elena had had any reason to suspect that anyone in the organization was compromised beyond Bellamy and Grant. The alliance. Elena went back over it carefully. What had Carla actually said? I'm not surprised by what you found, which was not an offer of loyalty, which was not a statement of opposition to anything, which was, Elena now understood, a very precise use of language from someone who had been careful about language for a long time. She had heard what she wanted to hear. She had been told what she was meant to hear. Webb was still in the room. He was watching her face. Carla Dunn, Elena said. Webb went very still. She's part of it, Elena said. Elena, look at the trigger layer. She turned the screen. The final authorization node for the transfer sequence sits in the legal interface accounts. Her domain, her access. It's structured to look like routine, compliant settlements, the kind of transactions that process without any secondary review because they're categorized as legal disbursements. Webb looked at the screen for a long time. His face did something difficult and controlled. I recommended her to you, he said. You told me Silas trusted her, Elena said. That's not the same as recommending her. I should have looked harder. We both should have looked harder, she said. I accepted Silas's assessment because I needed someone to trust, and I took the first option he offered me. That's on me. She paused. How long have you known Carla? 7 years. Has she ever given you a reason to question her? He thought about it, genuinely thought about it, which she appreciated. No. Which I'm now reconsidering as a data point rather than evidence of integrity. She's been careful, Elena said. Same as Grant. Same as the whole architecture patient. Consistent and visible. She looked at the screen. They've been building this for years. They've been building this for years, and they've been building it by being the people no one questioned. She thought about the gray cardigans. She thought about 3 years of making herself unremarkable. She understood, with a clarity that was almost physical, how it was done. You became invisible, not because you were weak, but because invisibility was the most efficient way to build something without interference. She had done it herself. The difference was what you were building. We need to brief Silas, Webb said. I know. We can't wait any longer. It pelted her until the light changed. If Carla knows that you're looking at the architecture, if she's been watching what you access, she'll know you're close. She'll accelerate the timeline. She know? Elena said. I don't know. Does Grant know? I don't know that either. Elena stood up. She pulled on her blazer, which she had taken off 2 hours ago, and she smoothed it flat. Her hands were not shaking. She noticed this as a fact, without particular pride in it. Her hands were not shaking because there was no room left for the luxury of shaking. Then we brief Silas now, she said. And we do it before Carla gets to her office. Silas was in his office at the end of the corridor, and when Elena knocked and entered without waiting for answer, he looked up from the document he was reading, with an expression that began as irritation, and revised itself quickly when he saw her face. She closed the door. She told him. She told him everything, in order, without softening any of it, the transit subsidiary accounts, the exit architecture, the 8 pressure points, the 41 million in liquid exposure, the dead man's switch probability, and then Carla Dunn's name attached to the trigger layer, and then the part she had been steeling herself to say, since she sat in her office at 6:23 and put it together. Grant brought me to the gala to expose Bellamy, she said, not as a joke, not to humiliate me, to use me. I was the mechanism for removing a liability he couldn't remove himself. And my promotion, my access to the full architecture, that was part of his plan too. He needed someone with my access inside the system before he could activate the exit structure. Silas had not moved through any of this. He sat behind his desk, with his hands flat on the surface, and his face doing nothing visible, which Elena had learned in the last week was not the same as feeling nothing. When she finished, the silence lasted 11 seconds. Then Silas said, Grant. Not a question, not directed at anyone in particular, just the name, spoken quietly, with the particular quality of a word that has changed meaning in the process of being said. 11 years, he said. Yes, Elena said. Another silence. Webb was standing to her left, and she could feel him measuring the room the way he always measured rooms. Carla, Silas said. Yes. How long? I don't know. At minimum, long enough to build the trigger layer into the legal interface accounts. Given the complexity of the architecture, probably 3 or 4 years. Trusted her. Yes. Silas stood up. He walked to the window and stood there with his back to them, and his hands were at his sides, and his shoulders were level, which Elena was beginning to understand was what control looked like on him when it was costing him something. How do we stop the exit without triggering the dead man's switch? He said. I need to dismantle each pressure point individually and sequentially, in an order that doesn't alert the monitoring triggers. It will take time, 4 to 6 hours minimum, to do it safely. Do you know how to do it? Yes. He turned around. He looked at her, and the look was not anger. She had been prepared for anger, but something rawer than that. The look of someone who has just understood the full dimension of how they were betrayed, and has not yet had time to decide what to do with the understanding. And Grant doesn't know you've found it, he said. Not yet, she said. If Carla has been monitoring my access patterns, she may know I've been in the vicinity of the architecture. But I haven't touched any of the pressure points. I've only mapped them. How much time do we have? I don't know. If Carla escalates to Grant this morning, very little. If she hasn't noticed yet, maybe until end of business today. Silas looked at Webb. Where is Grant right now? I can find out, Webb said. Do that. Silas looked back at Elena. You start dismantling the architecture now. I need a progress report every 40 minutes. And Elena, he paused. Nobody else on this floor knows any of this until it's done. Not Daniel Cho, not anyone in accounting. Nobody. The smaller the circle, the better the chance that Carla doesn't hear anything before you finish. Understood, she said. She turned to leave. He spoke again. Elena. She turned. I'm sorry, he said, that you were put in this position. Prized her. She had not expected it, and she did not know immediately what to do with it. So she did what she always did with things. She did not know how to process. She filed it and kept moving. I put myself in it, she said. Grant just gave me the door. She went back to her office and sat down and opened the architecture on her screen and started working. She was 40 minutes into the dismantling, methodical and precise, moving through the first pressure point node by node, the way you would diffuse something that was listening to your hands, when her office door opened and Carla Dunn walked in. Carla was 55, neat, with short silver hair and the kind of composed expression that Elena now recognized as professional camouflage. She was carrying a coffee, her own, and she did not offer Elena one, which was not unusual, except that Elena was now reading everything differently. "Good morning," Carla said. She looked at Elena's screen without appearing to look at it, the way experienced people look at things they are not supposed to seem interested in. "Morning," Elena said. She did not close the spreadsheet. Closing it would be more alarming than leaving it open, because leaving it open meant Elena did not know she was being watched. Carla sat down across from her without being invited. Same chair as Tuesday. Same easy, unhurried movement. "You've been in early," Carla said. "Lots to map," Elena said. "How's the architecture looking?" The question was casual. Perfectly, carefully casual, and Elena felt the whole room sharpen. "Complex," Elena said. "Whoever designed the delegation chains was thorough." "The organization has been building this structure for a long time," Carla said. "There are layers that predate the current administration. It can be hard to distinguish what's historical and what's current." "Yes," Elena said, "though usually you can tell by the style. Older structures have a different logic, more organic. The newer work is more deliberate." Carla's expression did not change, but something in her posture shifted a microscopic adjustment, a slight settling, like a person who has received information they were waiting for and is now deciding what to do with it. "The legal interface accounts," Carla said. "Have you gotten to those yet?" Elena looked at her. Carla looked back. The air in the room had changed completely, and they both knew it, and the pretense of the conversation fell away between them, like something that had served its purpose and was no longer necessary. "Why are you here, Carla?" Elena said. Carla set her coffee down on the desk, slowly, deliberately, the way people set things down when they want the gesture to be legible. "Grant knows you found the transit accounts," she said. "He's known since 7:15 this morning. He has a monitoring alert on the architecture. Any access to the third or fourth delegation layer triggers a notification." She paused. "He asked me to come and assess how much you understand." Elena's hands were flat on the desk. "And what are you going to tell him?" she said. Carla looked at her for a long moment, and then she said something that Elena had not been prepared for, in a voice that had lost all of the careful, professional smoothness and sounded, for the first time, like a person rather than a performance. "I'm going to tell him I couldn't find you," Carla said. "Your office was empty." Elena stared at her. "I have 40 seconds before he expects a call back," Carla said. "So I need you to listen very carefully, because I'm only going to say this once. And after I leave this room, I'm going to behave exactly as if this conversation never happened." Elena listened. "The dead man switch is real," Carla said. "But the trigger condition isn't organizational interference. The trigger condition is Grant's biometric authorization, which he has to enter manually by noon today, or the transfer sequence executes automatically. He built it that way to make sure he couldn't be pressured into abandoning the exit once he sets the noon deadline. The only way to stop it is for him to enter the cancellation code himself, or for someone to prevent him from entering the authorization." She held Elena's eyes. "I've been inside this architecture for 4 years. I built the legal layer myself. And 3 weeks ago I decided I didn't want to be the person who helps $41 million disappear and leaves 7 people in this organization holding the consequences." Elena said nothing. "You have until noon," Carla said. 3 hours and 4 minutes. "I suggest you stop mapping and start moving." She picked up her coffee, stood up, and walked out of Elena's office. And Elena heard her heels in the corridor, measured and unhurried, and then there was nothing. Elena looked at the clock in the corner of her screen. 8:56. She picked up her phone and called Silas. He answered on the first ring. "Grant knows," she said. "He has a monitoring alert on the architecture, and Silas, the dead man's switch is biometric. He has to manually authorize by noon, or the transfer executes automatically. We don't have time to dismantle anything." A silence, short and complete. "Then we need Grant in a room before noon," Silas said. "Yes. And we need him to either cancel the authorization, or we need to physically prevent him from entering it." "Yes." "Where is he?" "I don't know," Elena said. Webb was finding out. "Call Webb." "I'm calling Webb," Silas said. "Elena, whatever you need to do in the next 3 hours, do it. Don't ask me first. Just do it." The line went dead. Elena stood up. She picked up her blazer. She looked at the screen one more time, the architecture, the 8 pressure points, the $41 million sitting inside the structure like water behind a dam, and then she looked away from it because the screen was not where this was going to be decided. She had 3 hours and 4 minutes. She had never in her life done anything that was not careful, measured, and controlled. She was about to find out what she was when careful was no longer an option. Elena was in the corridor before she had fully decided to be there. Her heels on the marble were too loud, and she didn't slow down. 42nd floor was beginning to fill. She could hear phones, a printer, 2 people talking near the kitchen, and she moved through it without making eye contact with anyone, because eye contact would require acknowledgement, and acknowledgement would cost seconds she did not have. Webb was coming out of the stairwell at the far end of the corridor when she reached it. He saw her face and stopped walking. "Grant," she said. "We're his office. He was there 12 minutes ago. My contact on 38 says he took a call, then asked for his car to be brought around. He's leaving, or positioning to leave. Same thing." She was already moving toward the elevator. "His car, what entrance?" "Garage level 2, south exit." "How long to get there from his office if he's moving now?" 7 minutes. 8 if he stops." She hit the elevator button. The display said 14 seconds. She looked at the time on her phone. 9:03. 2 hours and 57 minutes. The elevator was taking too long. She went to the stairwell. She was on the 38th floor, breathing harder than she wanted to when her phone buzzed. "Silas." "He's not in his office," Silas said. "Renata confirmed he left 4 minutes ago. He had a bag." "Garage level 2, Elena said. She was still moving, taking the stairs 2 at a time, one hand on the rail. "South exit. I'm 3 floors above the garage. I have 2 people on the way." "Who? Mine, not Grant's." "Tell them to hold position. Don't approach him. If he thinks he's being cornered before noon, he might execute the authorization early." A pause. "You think he'd do that?" "I think he spent 4 years building a switch that he controls personally because he does not trust anyone, including himself, under pressure." "Yes. I think if he believes the exit is closing, he moves the timeline." She hit the garage level door at a controlled push, not a crash, because crashing through a door was the kind of thing that changed the temperature of a space before you could read it. "Hold your people back," she said. "I need to talk to him first." "Elena, 2 minutes. Give me 2 minutes with him first." She ended the call before he could object. Garage level 2 was cold and low-ceilinged and smelled like concrete and exhaust and the particular staleness of enclosed air. The fluorescent lights ran in strips above her, and one of them was flickering near the south exit, which meant the south end of the garage had a strobe quality that was disorienting in a way she did not have time to be disoriented by. Grant's car was a black Mercedes, and it was idling near the south exit ramp with the driver already behind the wheel. Grant was standing beside the rear door with a leather bag over one shoulder, his phone tied to his ear, his back partially to her. She walked toward him at a pace that was not slow enough to be unthreatening and not fast enough to be a run, and she covered 30 feet before he turned and saw her. He lowered his phone. They looked at each other across 20 feet of garage concrete. "Elena," he said. His voice was level, his face was level. He looked like a man who had anticipated this moment and prepared for it, which was exactly what he was. "Grant," she said. She stopped 10 feet from him. Close enough that this was a conversation, not a shout. Far enough that it was not a confrontation yet. "You found the architecture," he said. "Tuesday morning," she said. "The transit subsidiary accounts." Something moved across his face. A recalculation, fast and controlled. "That's faster than I expected." "I'm good at my job," she said. "You are," he agreed. It was not a compliment. It was an acknowledgement, which was different and more complicated, which is why I needed you to have the access you have. "I know why you needed me," she said. "I know all of it, Grant. The whole architecture. The pressure points. The trigger layer. The noon deadline." He looked at her. His jaw moved once, like he was deciding whether to say something, and then he decided against it and said nothing. "What I don't know," Elena said, "is why Carla told me." This one landed differently. She watched it land. The surface stayed controlled, but something behind his eyes sharpened. A quick animal alertness that came and went in under a second. "What did she tell you?" he said. "Enough," Elena said. "She told me enough." "When this morning?" 8:56. Grant was quiet for 3 seconds. She watched him calculate Carla's timeline against his own, working out what Carla had known and when she had known it and why she had made the choice she made, and she could see from the micro-movements in his face that the calculation was producing a result he had not built into his models. "She's been with me 4 years," he said. "I know. She believes in what I'm building." "What are you building, Grant?" Elena said. "Tell me. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like $41 million and an exit strategy." His chin came up slightly. "This organization is a machine," he said. "Processes money and it processes people, and it will do both for another 30 years until something from outside finally breaks it. I'm not interested in being processed." He paused. "I built something that gives me the ability to leave on my own terms. That's not theft, that's autonomy." "It's theft," Elena said. "The language you use for it doesn't change what it is." "The language I use for it is the only thing that's mine," he said. "Everything else in that building was built on other people's foundations. Walter Vane's relationships, Silas Vane's name. I have been the operational center of this organization for 11 years, and I have been compensated for approximately 40% of that value." He held her gaze. "The architecture I built is a correction, not a crime. The people whose accounts you're draining won't see it that way." "I don't particularly care how they see it," he said. "I know," she said. "That's the problem." They stood in the cold garage, under the flickering light, and looked at each other, and Elena was doing 2 things simultaneously. She was holding his attention with the conversation, and she was watching the clock in the corner of her vision, which she could not actually see, but which she was tracking in her head with the part of her mind that always tracked time. 9:11. 2 hours and 49 minutes. She needed him talking. She needed him here and talking, and not in that car. "He canceled the authorization," she said. He almost laughed. "Not quite. No. Grant, no. Simple. Final." The voice of someone who has made a decision so thoroughly that revisiting it is not a process he recognizes. "I spent 4 years building this. I spent 4 years being careful and patient and completely invisible inside an organization that never once looked at me properly. And you want me to cancel it because you found the architecture 3 days into your new role." He looked at her with something that was almost respect, almost, beneath the hardness. "Elena, you're extraordinary at what you do, but this is not a negotiation." "Then what is it?" she said. "A goodbye," he said. "I'm getting in the car. By noon, the transfer completes, and I'm gone. Nobody gets hurt. The organization takes a hit, restructures, survives you, and I both know it will survive. Silas will be furious for 6 months, and then he'll rebuild." He reached for the car door. "Don't be in this garage when the transfer completes. It's going to be chaotic, and I don't want you caught in it. There are 2 of Silas's people at the exit ramp," she said. His hand stopped on the door handle. "I told them to hold position," she said. "They're holding. But if you get in that car, I can't guarantee what Silas tells them to do." Grant turned back to her. Controlled surface had not cracked, but she could see the pressure behind it, now the years of patience and calculation, and the specific tension of someone who is very close to the finish and can feel the distance narrowing. "Call them off," he said. "Cancel the authorization," she said. "Elena." "Grant." He stared at her. She stared back. The flickering light above the south exit was doing something unpleasant to both of their faces, and neither of them blinked. And then Grant's phone rang. He looked at the screen. Something in his posture changed, not visibly, not dramatically, but she felt it, the way you feel a temperature drop before you see the weather change. He answered it. He said nothing for 6 seconds. Then he said when, and listened, and said, "All right," and ended the call. He looked at Elena. "Carla is with Silas," he said. Elena felt her stomach drop. She went to him directly, Grant said, and his voice was very quiet now, the specific quiet of someone processing a betrayal in real time while maintaining function. 20 minutes ago, while she was telling you what she was going to keep from me." He exhaled through his nose, a single controlled breath. "So you didn't know that?" "No," Elena said honestly. "She told you about the biometric authorization, the noon deadline, the trigger condition." He was working through it, auditing it, not looking at Elena anymore, but at the middle distance behind her. "And she told Silas the same thing. Or enough of it that he can lock the system down from the administrative layer before noon." "I don't know what she told him." Elena said. I've been down here. He focused on her again. If they lock the system down from the administrative layer, the dead man's switch triggers, Elena said. Yes. I know. That's why I told Silas to hold his people. Did he listen? I don't know, she said. And she did not know, and the not knowing was a cold space opening in her chest, because Silas was furious, and he had Carla in the room with him. And if Carla was no longer protecting the architecture from interference, if Carla had decided the information she'd given, Elena was not enough, and had gone directly to Silas with the administrative override codes. Her phone buzzed. She looked at it. Silas, she answered. Don't touch the system, she said before he could speak. Carla is here, Silas said. His voice was tightly controlled, the surface of someone holding a very large amount of anger on a very short leash. She's given me the override codes for the administrative layer. Do not use them, Elena said. The trigger condition. Carla says the trigger condition is Grant's biometric. If we lock him out of the administrative layer before he can enter the authorization, the sequence can't execute. Carla said the trigger executes if there's organizational interference. Carla is saying something different now, Silas said. Elena looked at Grant. Grant was watching her face. The way you watch someone's face when you cannot hear the other side of the conversation, but you can read the situation in how they hold themselves. Put Carla on, Elena said. A pause, a shuffle. Then Carla's voice, and it sounded exactly like it had sounded in Elena's office, measured, careful. The voice of someone choosing each word like they're stepping across ice. Elena, what did you tell him? Elena said. The truth, Carla said. Which truth? The one you told me or a different one? A pause. A small one. The administrative lock will stop the sequence. Grant can't authorize without biometric access to the system, and if the system is locked, there's no point of entry. You told me the dead man's switch triggers on organizational interference. I told you the trigger condition was Grant's biometric. Those aren't the same thing. Elena turned away from Grant and dropped her voice. Carla, are you telling me you gave me incomplete information this morning? Pause this time was longer. I gave you the information you needed to keep Grant talking, Carla said. Which you did, which bought us 20 minutes. Elena closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. Carla had told her the noon deadline. Carla had told her the biometric trigger. Carla had not told her about the administrative override, because if Elena had known about the override, she would have told Silas immediately, and Silas would have used it immediately, and the conversation in the garage would never have happened. Carla had needed Elena in the garage, keeping Grant there, talking, while Carla went to Silas with the override codes. 2 mechanisms. Elena had been the mechanism twice. She opened her eyes. Lock it, she said, do it now. She ended the call and turned back to Grant. He read her face. They're locking the system, he said. Yes. For a moment he was very still. His hand was still on the car door handle, and the leather bag was still on his shoulder, and the car was still running. And for that moment, he looked not like the patient architect of a 4-year exit strategy, but like a man who has run a very long race and arrived at the finish line to find it has been moved. Then he dropped his hand from the door handle. He set the bag down on the concrete. He turned and leaned against the car with his arms crossed and his face doing something complicated and controlled, and he looked at Elena with an expression she had no precedent for reading on him. You've been the mechanism twice, he said. You know that. Yes, she said. I know. And you're not angry at Carla for it. I'm furious at Carla for it, she said. That's not the same as being wrong about the outcome. He looked at her for a long moment. Then, with his back against the car and his 4-year plan locked inside a system he could no longer access, he laughed a short, real, completely humorless sound that came from somewhere past the controlled surface. You know what the worst part is, he said. Tell me. You're better at this than I am, he said. And I built the whole thing around the assumption that you weren't. He shook his head once. That was the mistake. Right there. I saw the gray cardigans and the downcast eyes, and I saw exactly what I needed to see and not one thing more. Most people do, she said. I know, he said. That's what I should have known better. His phone rang again. He looked at it, and this time he did not answer. He let it ring. He looked at the screen until it stopped, and then he looked at Elena. Silas's people, she said. Yes, they're going to come down here now. Yes. She looked at him standing against the car in the cold garage, the leather bag at his feet, the exit ramp 20 feet away, and completely irrelevant. And she felt something that was not sympathy. She would not call it sympathy, but was adjacent to it. Specific feeling of recognizing someone, of seeing the shape of what they were, and understanding it completely, even while opposing it entirely. Grant, she said, when they come down here, don't make it worse. Whatever you're thinking about doing, don't. He looked at her. What do you think I'm thinking about doing? I think you're thinking about the exit ramp, she said. I think you're thinking that if you move fast enough, you're in the car and up the ramp before the two people at the top can react, and then you're in traffic and you have 6 hours before the organization can do anything official. He said nothing. The transfer is locked, she said. The money doesn't move. You leave with the bag on your shoulder and 11 years of burnt bridges and nowhere to put either of them. She held his eyes. It's not an exit. It's just a run. The garage was very quiet. The idling car engine, the flicker of the bad light, her own heartbeat, which she could feel in her throat. Grant picked up the bag. She tensed. He turned and handed it through the driver's window to the driver. Take it back upstairs, he said. My office. The driver, who had been staring at the steering wheel with tremendous concentration, took the bag without a word and set it on the passenger seat. Grant turned back to Elena. He uncrossed his arms. He put his hands in his coat pockets. He looked, she thought, suddenly very tired, the specific exhaustion of someone who has been holding a shape for so long that letting it go feels like a physical release, even when the letting go is not a choice. You said don't make it worse, he said. Yes. What does better look like from here? He said. Because I want to hear what you think that means. Genuinely. She looked at him. She thought about it honestly, the way she thought about everything. You know where everything is, she said. The complete architecture, every layer you built, every pressure point, every channel. You understand it better than I do because you built it. She paused. That knowledge has value to Silas. More value than whatever the organization would recover from the transfer. You're suggesting I cooperate, he said. I'm suggesting it's the only version of this that ends with you having any options at all, she said, which is different from suggesting it's good. It's not good. It's what's left. He was quiet for a moment. The stairwell door opened behind her. She heard footsteps, 2 sets, moving with purpose, and she did not turn around. She kept her eyes on Grant. He looked past her, at whoever had come through the door. Then he looked back at her, and the exhaustion was still there, and underneath it something else. Something she could not quite name, that lived in the space between defeat and decision. Silas is upstairs, she said quietly. Whatever you say to him, say it straight. He responds better to straight than to managed. I know how Silas responds, Grant said. Then use it, she said. The footsteps reached them. She heard Webb's voice behind her. And careful, Mr. Mercer. Grant looked at her for one more second. You're going to be very good at this, he said. Not admiringly, not bitterly, just plainly, in the tone of someone acknowledging a fact that has personal cost attached to it. I know, she said. He turned to Webb. He squared his shoulders. He said, let's go up. And they walked back toward the stairwell. Webb and the other man flanking Grant, not touching him. The careful courtesy of a handled situation. And Elena stood alone in the cold garage and listened to the stairwell door close, and then stood in the quiet and the bad flickering light and let herself breathe. Her hands were shaking now. She noticed this, the way she had noticed them not shaking earlier, as a fact, without judgment. The shaking was what happened when the thing you were holding your body together for was finished and your nervous system had time to process that it had been running on something other than calm for the last 3 hours. Put her hands flat against the cold roof of Grant's idling car and breathed. 9:27 cents. 2 hours and 33 minutes still left on the clock. But the clock didn't matter now. The clock was someone else's emergency. The transfer was locked. Grant was going upstairs. Carla was already with Silas. The architecture Grant had built over 4 years, patient and invisible and extraordinarily thorough, was still inside the system, still intact. 8 pressure points still open, trigger layer still live, all of it waiting in the dark interior of the account network, like a machine that had been built to run and hadn't yet been told it wasn't going to. Somebody still had to dismantle it, carefully, sequentially. node by node, the way you take apart something that is listening to your hands. That was her work, and was waiting for her, and it would take most of the rest of the day. And she was going to do it alone because there was no one else in the organization who understood the structure well enough to do it without breaking something in the process of fixing it. She straightened up. She took her hands off the car roof. She turned and walked toward the stairwell, and she did not look at the south exit ramp or the gray morning light above it, because there was no version of this that she was running from, and there was nothing beyond that exit that was relevant to what she needed to do next. The door was heavy. She pushed it open. The fluorescent lights of the stairwell were steadier than the garage, and she climbed in their reliable, ugly light, her heels sharp on the concrete steps, 42 floors above her, and the work still waiting, and the morning barely started. On the 31st floor, her phone buzzed. Silas. One line, no preamble. Grant is talking. Get up here when you're ready. She kept climbing. On the 38th floor, another buzz. Webb this time. He gave us the full architecture map. Everything. Said you'd know what to do with it. She stopped on the 39th floor landing and stood still for a moment with the phone in her hand, and Webb's message on the screen. Grant had given them the map before he even sat down with Silas. She thought about what he had said in the garage. You're better at this than I am, and I built the whole thing around the assumption that you weren't. Put her phone in her pocket and kept climbing. She was 3 floors from 42 when the stairwell door 2 flights below her opened, and she heard footsteps coming up fast. Not Webb's measured tread, not the deliberate pace of someone in control of their situation. Fast, urgent. The footsteps of someone who had just received information and was moving on it. She stopped. The footsteps reached the landing below her, and the person came around the turn in the stairwell, and she saw who it was. Daniel Cho. His face was white. His tie was loose, and he was breathing, like he had come up from a lower floor at speed. And when he saw her, he stopped, and the expression on his face was the expression of someone who has discovered they are holding something they do not want to be holding. Daniel, she said. What? He held out his phone. On the screen was a notification from the account monitoring system. Transfer alert. Not from the Vane organization's accounts. From an external source. Incoming. She took his phone and looked at the alert and felt the ground shift under her in a way that had nothing to do with the building. $12 million. In transit from an offshore entity she had not seen in the architecture. She had mapped this morning not one of Grant's pressure points, not anything connected to the exit structure she had spent the last 3 hours dismantling in her head. Something else. Something she had not found. The routing code was unfamiliar, but the entity name at the origin was not. Rafael Serrano. She stared at the name. She had no context for that name inside the Vane organization's accounts. She had never seen it in 3 years of processing records, in the week of intensive architectural mapping, in any of the documents Silas had given her access to. Who is Rafael Serrano? She said. Daniel Cho looked at her with the face of a man who does not want to be the person who says the thing he is about to say. He's a cartel financier out of Miami, Daniels said. He was one of the external relationships Grant maintained from Walter Vane's time. He paused. Elena, that 12 million, it's not incoming. The alert is formatted wrong. It's outgoing. It's already gone. She looked at the screen again. Formatting was wrong. She had read it wrong. In the stairwell, in the bad light, in the 3 seconds she had had to look at it. Outgoing. Already transferred. $12 million. Gone from an account she had not known existed into an entity called Serrano Holdings, LLC. Timestamped 6 minutes ago. 6 minutes ago, she had been in the garage. The architecture she had mapped was Grant's architecture. 8 pressure points. 41 million in exposure. 1 exit strategy. Locked and dismantled. But Grant was not the only person on the 42nd floor who had been building something inside this organization for a very long time. She handed Daniel's phone back to him. Call Silas, she said. Tell him we have a second problem. She started moving again. Faster now, her hand on the rail and her feet hitting the stairs in a rhythm that was no longer climbing but running. Because the work she had thought was done was not done. And the thing she had thought she understood was something she had understood only partially. And 3 floors above her in a building full of people who had been playing a very long game. Someone she had not yet identified had just moved $12 million while everyone was looking at Grant. She hit the 42nd floor door at a flat run and did not slow down. The corridor was the same corridor. It had always been charcoal carpet, matte white walls, recycled air, but it felt different. Now the way a room feels different after something has broken in it. The geometry unchanged, but the atmosphere carrying the residue of what happened. 3 people near the kitchen looked up when she came through the stairwell door, and she did not look back at any of them. Silas's office, end of the corridor. She pushed the door open without knocking. Silas was standing behind his desk. Grant was in the chair across from it, his jacket on, but his posture carrying the specific deflation of a man who has finished performing and is now simply sitting. Carla was near the window, her coffee gone, her hands at her sides, her face doing the thing Elena now recognized as her default expression, composed to the point of illegibility. Webb was by the door. He saw Elena's face and straightened. "Serrano," Elena said, looking at Silas. "Rafael Serrano. 12 million. It transferred 6 minutes ago from an account that wasn't in Grant's architecture. It wasn't in anything I mapped." The room went very still. Silas looked at Grant. Grant looked at Elena. Something in his face had changed, not the exhaustion that was still there, but underneath it, something sharper, more alert. He sat forward in the chair. "Which account?" "I don't have the full routing yet." Daniel pulled the alert. "The origin entity is Serrano Holdings, LLC. "That's not my architecture," Grant said. "I never built anything connected to Serrano." "I know," Elena said. "That's the problem." She looked at Carla. Carla was looking at the window. "Carla," Elena said. Carla turned. Her face was composed. Her hands were still. She looked like a woman waiting for a bus, which was the most alarming thing about her, which Elena had understood too late, and understood completely now. "The legal interface accounts," Elena said. "The trigger layer you built for Grant's exit structure. Was there a second layer underneath it?" Carla said nothing. "Carla," Silas's voice. Low, quiet. The tone Elena had learned to associate with him, being closest to the edge of what he would contain. "The Serrano relationship predates Grant," Carla said finally. "Predates me. It goes back to Walter. There was an outstanding obligation, a deferred settlement from a 2019 transaction that Walter negotiated and never completed. 12 million, principal and accrued. Serrano has been patient because the relationship was worth more to him than the money." She paused. "When Grant activated the exit structure, when the monitoring alert fired this morning, Serrano's system read it as a dissolution signal. Prearranged trigger. If the vein organization initiated an internal financial restructuring above a certain threshold, the settlement executed automatically." Elena stared at her. "Grant's architecture triggered Serrano's settlement." "Yes." "Did you know that when you came to my office this morning?" Pause that lasted exactly long enough to answer the question before Carla spoke. "I knew there was a Serrano obligation," she said. "I didn't know the trigger threshold had been set that low." "That's not an answer," Elena said. "It's the answer I have," Carla said. The silence in the room was dense. Elena could hear her own breathing, and Grant's, and the distant sound of the floor operating beyond the closed door, and none of it felt like enough air. "Where does the 12 million go?" Silas said. His voice was very controlled. "Serrano Holdings is a Miami entity," Elena said. "From there it depends on his distribution structure. We have maybe 6 hours before it's in a jurisdiction we can't reach. Can we reverse the transfer?" "Not without Serrano's cooperation," Elena said. "The originating account, whoever authorized the release, that authorization is already processed. The money left our system clean." "Who authorized it?" Silas said. Elena looked at Carla. Carla looked at the window again. "The legal interface accounts," Elena said. "That's Carla's domain. Every disbursement that runs through the legal layer requires her authorization code. It was a prearranged automatic execution," Carla said. "My code was embedded in the trigger when the obligation was structured in 2019. I didn't authorize it this morning. It authorized itself." "Using your code," Elena said. "Using my code from 2019, Carla said, "which I did not place there this morning." "But which you knew was there," Elena said. Pause again. "Yes," Carla said quietly. "I knew it was there." Silas walked around his desk. He crossed the room and stood in front of Carla, and he was not a tall man, but he had the quality of taking up space in a way that had nothing to do with physical size. And Carla looked at him with the composure of someone who has been preparing for a specific moment and is now inside it. "You let it happen," Silas said. "I let the obligation be fulfilled," Carla said. Walter incurred it. It was real, it was owed. $12 million. Yes. Without telling me it existed. Walter didn't tell you it existed, Carla said. I maintained it because it was an active obligation, and letting it lapse would have created a different problem. A worse one. She met his eyes. Serrano doesn't negotiate lapsed debts. Collects them in ways that don't involve wire transfers. The room absorbed this. Elena watched Silas's face work through it, the anger and the calculation running simultaneously, each one tempering the other, because he was the kind of person who could not afford to let either one run unchecked. She had seen it before. She understood it better now than she had a week ago. "Get out," Silas said to Carla. Not loudly. "My people will find you a room downstairs. You don't leave the building." Carla nodded once. She picked up nothing. She had brought nothing with her, and she walked to the door, and Webb opened it, and she went through, and Webb followed. And then it was just Elena and Silas, and Grant in the office, with the door closed. Grant was still in the chair. He had not moved through any of this. He was watching Elena with an expression she recognized now, the expression of someone reassessing a landscape. "The 12 million, he said to Elena. "You said 6 hours. "Approximately," she said. "Serrano is in Miami," he said. "I know his operation. I've managed that relationship for 8 years. He looked at Silas. "I can get on a plane and sit across from him and ask him to return it. He won't return it, but I know what he values more than $12 million. "What does he value more than $12 million? Elena said. "Structural security," Grant said. "Serrano has been building legitimate cover for his operation for 6 years. He has exposure in 3 jurisdictions that he's been managing through a network of shell entities. He knows I know the structure because I helped build the interface between his network and ours." He paused. "He also knows that if I go to Miami and sit across from him, I'm not bringing anything he can use against me, because I'm already in the position I'm in, which means I can offer him something that doesn't cost me anything anymore." "What?" Silas said. "A clean interface," Grant said. "Documentation that closes the 2019 obligation officially, structured, so that both sides of the transaction are compliant from a reporting standpoint. Serrano gets a legitimate paper trail for $12 million that he received. The money is already his. I'm not asking for it back. I'm offering to make it clean." He paused. "He keeps the money. He gives us something in exchange." "What does he give us?" Elena said. Grant looked at her. "Information. He knows things about the Southeastern Distribution Network that nobody in this organization has been able to verify. Routes, contacts, the full structure of 3 competitor operations that have been cutting into our margins for 2 years." He held her eyes. "Worth more than $12 million. You'd go to Miami," Silas said flatly, "after today." "I'd go to Miami," Grant said, "because it's the only thing I can do that has any value to anyone, including me, and because Serrano will meet with me when he won't meet with anyone you send cold." Elena looked at Silas. Silas looked at the space between them and thought, and she watched him think, and she did not fill the silence because the silence was doing necessary work. "No," Silas said. Grant accepted this with a single nod. "Elena goes," Silas said. Both of them looked at him. Grant gives her everything he knows about Serrano. His preferences, his pressure points, his structure. She takes Daniel Chacho as operational support. She goes to Miami and she sits across from Rafael Serrano. He looked at Elena. "Can you do that?" She thought about her mother's hands. That morning, the way Margaret had held the phone crooked because her grip wasn't reliable anymore. The specific sound of her voice, when she said she was fine, when she was not entirely fine. She thought about the gray cardigans at the back of her closet. She thought about a ballroom where she had walked in wearing black and stood straight and said true things to dangerous people, and how afterwards she had stood at the window and felt the floor shift under her perception of what she was capable of. "Yes," she said. She was on a plane to Miami at 2:15 in the afternoon. Daniel was in the seat next to her with a tablet open to the Serrano Holdings structure, which Grant had mapped for them in 40 minutes, with the specific Precise efficiency of someone who had carried the information for years and had nothing left to protect it for. He had drawn diagrams. He had named names. He had answered every question Elena asked without hesitation or qualification. And when they were finished, he had looked at her across the table and said, "Tell him the 2019 documentation will come from legal within 72 hours. He'll know that's a real commitment if it comes from someone with your access level." She had not thanked him. It had not seemed like the appropriate response. On the plane, she read everything Daniel had prepared and looked out the window at the Atlantic, approaching, and thought about nothing in particular, which was the closest she had come to rest in 4 days. Serrano's office was a glass-fronted building in Brickell, the financial district, 9 floors above the street. Conference room they put her in overlooked the water and was cold. The way expensive rooms are cold, aggressively, deliberately, as a statement about who controls the temperature. Rafael Serrano was 57, lean, with silver at his temples and the kind of tan that came from actual sun rather than a machine. He came into the room flanked by 2 men who stood at the walls and did not sit, and he looked at Elena the way Elena had been looked at many times in her life, assessing, dismissing, and then reassessing when the dismissal did not produce the expected response. He sat across from her and did not offer his hand. "I expected Grant," he said. "Grant is in New York," she said. "You're the financial director." "Yes. You've been in the position for a week," he said. 6 days, she said. He looked at her for a moment. Then something in his face shifted slightly. A recalibration she recognized. The look of someone encountering a fact that does not fit their existing model, and deciding whether to adjust the model or dismiss the fact. 6 days, he said. "And they sent you to Miami." "I asked to come," she said. "That's a different thing." "Is it?" "Yes," she said. "People who are sent tend to carry someone else's agenda. I'm carrying my own." He looked at her. Then he picked up the glass of water in front of him and drank from it without breaking eye contact, which was a dominance gesture so standard that she had read about it in 3 separate books on negotiation psychology, and she looked back at him without adjusting her posture by a single degree. "The 12 million transferred this morning," he said. "I know," she said. "The 2019 obligation. Walter Vane's debt. Fulfilled," he said. "Automatically, as structured." "Yes," she said. "I'm not here to dispute it or ask for it back." He set the glass down. This surprised him. She could see it in the small stillness that preceded his next movement. "Then what are you here for?" "Documentation," she said. "The transaction is real. The obligation was legitimate. Both of our organizations benefit from having it properly recorded rather than sitting as an informal deferred settlement on books that neither of us wants scrutinized." She opened the folder Daniel had prepared and set it on the table between them without sliding it across, leaving it in the neutral space where he could choose to reach for it or not. 72 hours from now, our legal team will transmit formal closing documentation for the 2019 transaction. Compliant. Clean. It gives you a legitimate basis for $12 million received. He looked at the folder without touching it. "And in exchange, information," she said. "The Southeastern Distribution Network. Routes and contacts for 3 competitor operations. Grant told me you have visibility into that structure." "Grant told you," Serrano said. "Grant, who is currently sitting in New York in a considerably diminished position." "Yes," she said. "And you trust what Grant told you?" "I trust that Grant told me what was accurate," she said. "Whether he told me everything accurate is a different question, which is why I'm sitting here asking you instead of relying on his account." Serrano looked at her for a long time. The 2 men at the walls had not moved. The air conditioning was running. Outside the glass, Miami was doing what Miami does in the afternoon, bright hot, loud in a way you can see from inside the silence. "You're not what I expected," he said. "People say that," she said. "Walter Vane used to send lawyers," he said. "Silas sends accountants. Grant came himself, which I always respected even when I found him difficult." He paused. "You're not a lawyer, and you're not an accountant in the way that matters." "No," she agreed. "What are you then?" She thought about how to answer that honestly. "I'm the person who knows where every dollar went," she said. "In an organization like ours, that's not a clerical function. It's a strategic one." He reached forward and picked up the folder. He opened it and he read the way Silas read slowly, completely, without skimming. When he finished, he set it on the table and looked at it rather than at her for a moment. 3 competitor networks, he said. You want all 3? Yes. That's more than the value of the documentation I'm receiving. The documentation removes a regulatory exposure you've been managing around for 6 years, she said. The value of that isn't the 12 million. It's everything you've built on top of the 12 million that currently sits in an uncertain legal position. He looked at her. Grant told me about the exposure, she said. I verified the structure before I got on the plane. 3 jurisdictions. The Cayman entity in particular has a classification problem that a motivated examiner would find inside a standard audit cycle. She held his eyes. I'm not threatening you with that. I want to be very clear, I'm not sitting here making threats. I'm telling you that the documentation we're offering closes a gap that costs you money and risk every year it stays open. And the information I'm asking for costs you nothing, because it's about your competitors, not your own operation. The room was quiet. Serrano closed the folder. He set it flat on the table and put both hands on it. And he looked at Elena Marlowe 6 days into a job she had been handed by circumstance and carved into shape by everything that had happened since. And he made a decision that she could see him in real time. And in the slight release of tension around his eyes, the almost imperceptible settling of his shoulders. 72 hours for the documentation, he said. 72 hours, she confirmed. I'll have my people transmit the network information within 24. Appreciated, she said. He stood. She stood. He extended his hand this time, and she took it, and his grip was firm and brief, and entirely professional. You should have been doing this a long time ago, he said. I was doing it, she said, just from a different position. He almost smiled. Not quite. He left the room with his 2 men, and Elena stood alone in the cold conference room overlooking the water, and let herself breathe for the second time that day. She was back in Manhattan by 10:30 that night. Silas was still in his office. She had not expected him to be, but she had not been surprised to find him there either. He was at his desk, with his jacket off, and his sleeves rolled to the elbow, which was the most undone she had seen him. And there were 2 glasses on the desk and a bottle of something amber that she did not recognize. He looked up when she came in. He read her face before she said anything. Done, he said. Done, she said. 24 hours for the network intelligence. Documentation from our legal team in 72. He poured into both glasses and pushed one toward the edge of the desk. She sat down and picked it up and did not ask what it was. She drank a small amount, and it was whiskey, good whiskey, the kind that cost more than she had made in a month 3 years ago. Grant, she said. What are you doing with him? He's given us a complete map of the architecture he built, Silas said. Everything. Cooperative and thorough. My lawyers say full cooperation at this level changes the calculus significantly in terms of what we can pursue and what we let sit. He stays in the organization, she said. No, Silas said. He's done here, but he leaves without the exit he built and without the alternative consequences. He looked at the glass in his hand. 11 years, he said. Not for the second time. I know, she said. He was right in a way, Silas said. Not about what he did, but the calculation that he'd been undercompensated, under-acknowledged. That's not entirely wrong. No, Elena said. It's not entirely wrong. I didn't see it. You weren't looking, she said. People who are running an operation tend not to look down at the people keeping it stable. That's not unique to you. He looked at her. Is that what happened to you? For 3 years? Thought about this honestly. Yes, she said. But I chose it. I made myself invisible because it served me. Grant did the same thing, except he was building something with the invisibility that I wasn't. You were surviving, Silas said. We were both surviving, she said. We just had different plans for what came after. He was quiet for a moment. The office was very still. Outside the windows, Manhattan was its usual lit self, enormous and indifferent and continuous. Carla, Elena said. She's downstairs, Silas said. My people have been with her all day. He set his glass down. 2019 obligation, she's been sitting on it for 5 years, maintaining it, paying the accrued interest through the legal account disbursements, categorized as routine compliance costs. I've been paying a debt I didn't know I had for 5 years. The disbursements would be findable in the records, Elena said. I know, he said. She knew I didn't look at the legal layer directly. She managed it. She wasn't stealing, Elena said. She was managing a liability she inherited from Walter that she didn't know how to surface without creating a crisis. That's a generous interpretation. It's the accurate one, Elena said. Whether it's also the legally or organizationally relevant one is a different question. But if you're deciding what Carla is, start from what she actually did, rather than what the worst version of it looks like. She paused. She told me about the biometric authorization this morning. She went to you with the override codes. She didn't have to do either of those things. She was also complicit in Grant's architecture, Silas said. Yes, Elena said. Both things are true. He looked at her. You're defending her. I'm describing her, Elena said. You can defend or condemn her after you understand her. Most people get that order backwards. Silas picked up his glass again and looked at it. What would you do with her? Remove her from the legal interface accounts, Elena said. Full audit of everything she touched in 5 years. If the audit shows the Serrano obligation was the only thing she managed outside normal disclosure, restructure her role to something with oversight. Audit shows more, then you have different information. And if I decide to remove her entirely, then that's your decision, Elena said. I'm giving you my analysis, not my instruction. He looked at her. Something in his expression had shifted from the controlled surface she had been reading all week, not warmth exactly, but the specific quality of a person who has stopped performing their authority and is simply being themselves. It was, she thought, what he looked like when he was tired enough to stop managing the impression. I owe you an apology, he said. She looked at him. For what specifically? For the way you've been used in the last week, he said. Grant. By Carla. By me. In the sense that I handed you an impossible situation and told you to handle it without giving you complete information. You didn't have complete information, she said. No, he said. But I could have been more careful about what I was asking you to walk into. She sat with this. I walked in myself, she said. In the garage with Grant, on the plane to Miami. Those were my choices. I know, he said. And they were the right choices, which makes it easier to acknowledge that the position you were making them from wasn't fair. She drank from the glass. The whiskey was warm going down, and she was tired in a way that had layers to it, the surface exhaustion of a day that had started at 4:30 in the morning, and underneath that the older, heavier fatigue of 3 years of holding herself in a shape that was not her actual shape. The black notebook, she said. Silas raised his eyes. I've had it since my first month, she said. Everything I found, everything I understood, every discrepancy and irregularity and name. 3 years of watching this organization from the inside. She set the glass down. I want to use it. All of it. A complete restructuring of the financial architecture, not just dismantling what Grant built, not just closing the gaps. A new structure. Cleaner, more resilient, with better internal oversight, so that the next Bellamy takes 6 months to identify instead of 4 years. Silas looked at her for a long moment. That's a significant project. Yes, she said. It will take time, and it will require authority, and people will push back because restructuring always exposes what people were hiding in the old structure, including things that are inconvenient to me, he said. She met his eyes. Yes, including that. He held her gaze. Then you'll do it, he said, with my backing. Complete authority over the financial architecture. I'll need it in writing, she said. You'll have it in the morning, he said. She stood. She picked up her bag. He stood also, reflexively, the automatic courtesy of someone who was raised with it. Elena, he said. She stopped. The gray cardigans, he said. What happened to them? She considered this question and everything it contained. They're at the back of my closet, she said. I haven't decided what to do with them yet. He looked at her steadily. Keep them, he said. Not because you need them, because you should remember what it cost to survive in them. That's worth keeping. She looked at him. She filed this, the way she filed everything, not discarding it, not immediately acting on it, but placing it somewhere she could find it later, when she understood its full value. Good night, Silas, she said. Good night, he said. She called her mother from the elevator. Margaret picked up on the third ring, her voice carrying the particular warmth of someone who has been waiting for a call they did not want to admit they were waiting for. They talked for 11 minutes. Elena stood in the lobby of the building after the elevator opened. Not walking out yet, just standing in the marble-floored entrance, with her bag over her shoulder and her phone to her ear, listening to her mother talk about a television program she had watched, and a woman at the facility who had gotten a new cat, and the way the physical therapist had said her right hand was showing improvement, small improvement, but real. "How was your week?" Margaret said. Elena thought about how to answer honestly. "Complicated," she said. "I'll tell you about it on Sunday. Are you all right?" She looked at the lobby doors and the city beyond them, the lit-up street and the traffic end, and the particular quality of late-night Manhattan that was not quiet, but was a different kind of loud than the daytime version. "Yes," she said. "I'm all right." They said goodnight, and she stood for another few seconds in the lobby, and then she walked out. The 42nd floor on Monday morning was the same floor it had always been. Carpet was charcoal gray. The walls were matte white. The recycled air recycled. The windows did what windows do, which was let in the light and hold out the weather, and the light at 8:15 was the flat, reliable light of a clear September morning that had no particular opinion about what was happening underneath it. Elena arrived at 7:58 with 2 coffees in a carrier, one for her, one for Daniel Cho, whom she had texted at 7:43 with a single line about the Serrano network intelligence arriving within the day, and could he be in early. Her office was where she had left it. Her screen was where she had left it. The spreadsheet with the architecture map was still open, 8 pressure points still marked, and she sat down and looked at it, and she sat down a new document, and started building something different, not a map of what was broken, but a blueprint for what she intended to build instead. She worked for 40 minutes before anyone else was on the floor. 8:41, Silas appeared in her doorway. He set a single sheet of paper on her desk organization, letterhead, his signature at the bottom, her authority over the complete financial architecture, stated in language that was unambiguous and comprehensive. She did not read it immediately. She looked at it, and then she looked at him. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once and walked back toward his office. She turned back to her screen. The blueprint was taking shape structural, layered, with built-in oversight mechanisms and redundant review triggers that would make the next 4-year silence impossible. It was not elegant yet. It was honest, which was more important, and it was thorough, which was what she did. She worked. The floor filled around her. Phones rang. A printer ran. 2 people laughed about something near the kitchen, and the sound traveled down the corridor and through her open door, and she let it come in without turning toward it. She had not put a cardigan on this morning. She had worn the charcoal blazer, the one she had bought the week before, and she had not looked at the back of her closet before she left. The gray cardigans were there, exactly where she had left them, holding their particular shape in the dark. She would not throw them away. Silas was right about that they were worth keeping as a record of what it had taken to stay alive inside a life that had not yet become the one she intended. But she would not wear them anymore, either, because the thing they had been protecting her from was the thing she had already survived, and you did not keep wearing the same armor after the war that required it was over. Outside the window, the East River moved the way it always moved, without urgency, without opinion, carrying whatever was put into it toward wherever it was going. On her screen, the blueprint for the new architecture filled 1 page and started on a second, and she leaned forward slightly without noticing she had done it. The specific lean of someone engaged with a problem that is exactly the right size for their mind, and she kept building. The woman who had survived by disappearing was gone. What remained did not need the darkness anymore. She had learned to move in the light, and she was not going back.